So, we talked about the miracle with the fish, and so again, what Matthew writes says, at this time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Okay, and then Jesus called the little child. Now, see what happened is what you don't read, and you got to look at Matthew and Mark, because basically what was really happening is as they were walking, they were kind of talking among themselves, going, hey, I'm going to be good. I'm going to get this position in God's kingdom. I'm going to get this position in God's kingdom. And so then they come up and they ask Jesus. I thought that was kind of a bold question. But then Jesus calls a little child to him. And he set them in the midst of them and says, "Surely I tell you, unless you convert," now pay attention to that word, "unless you convert and become like a little children, you will by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. For whoever humbles himself as this little child will be the greatest in the kingdom. And whoever receives this little child like this in my name receives me." So let me just stop right there. So it's kind of interesting. They're going through, and what's happening in their minds? What's going on? What word would you call it?
Pride.
Yeah, pride. I mean, they were Jesus' disciples. They've been with him now for at least 2 years. Maybe a little bit longer. Maybe almost 2.5 years. And they've seen a lot of stuff. They hear they believe that he's the Messiah. They're poor. I mean, they don't have nothing. I mean, we saw this in the last chapter. They didn't even have Peter and Jesus didn't even have enough money to pay the temple tax. But so that guy, and Jesus says, does the son of a king really have to pay tax? No, but so I don't offend this person. And that's a key point. Because what Jesus is bringing out, and you'll see this in chapter 18, he's not wanting us to offend people. And so what's happening is they're going along and they're walking along and they're having this little discussion. Who's going to be great? Who's going to be great? Who's going to be great? They come in and ask him. He comes down and he says, "Unless you convert and become like little children." Now, what's repentance?
Asking for forgiveness for something you done wrong.
Okay. What else? If you're truly repentant, what are you doing?
Change.
There's a change. What kind of a change?
Like a 180.
Yeah. In the military, it's called what?
About faith.
About face. See, here's the thing. It's not just accepting the little child or being like a little child. It's a conversion of the heart. Okay? Again, we looked at, I don't know if you remember, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is Philippians chapter 2. Because he says in there, he says, you need to have this attitude as of Christ. And then he goes through the attitude that Christ has. He was willing to come as a man. Come as a man. God created man. He was willing to come down and become a man. And not only become a man, but he came down to die on a cross. And again, I may get sermons mixed up. I hear from John or I hear from Jordan during this week. But one of them mentioned, either John or they said, salvation was known, the plan of salvation was known before the foundation of the earth. Jesus, God knew what he was going to do before he even created the heavens and the earth. And that's something to really, that's something to think. And so here it is, God's offering and says, hey, look, this ain't about you. This is not about who's great or who's small. He says you need to convert. You need to change your heart to begin to realize that you have to become like a child. Now, why a child?
Well, there's nothing more trusting, nothing more. You got to open now. You talk to a little kid, they're open.
Yeah.
You can tell them that they're just way, you are the protector, you're the provider, and they're all good with it. Just tell a little kid anything.
And the thing is and all of us have had children, or just now have children, and so the thing is that you sit there and you think, a little child, just as you said, a little child is dependent. Now they may cry a lot.
Oh, amen.
And they may want their milk pretty quick. And they may be selfish at times, but still, the attitude of that child is, like you said, they are dependent, they're open.
You are
you are, in a sense, their everything, and they know who to go to. You know, they may not know how to express it when they're a little baby,
They're gonna learn,
but they know who to go to. And so Jesus is saying, hey, look, you've got to be just like a little child. You've got to not only just be like a little child, you've got to convert. You got to do that about face. You got to do that 180-degree thing, because you got to stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about it. And so that's called what? If you're not thinking about yourself, what was it? You know, I said, what's the word? It starts with an H.
Humble.
Yeah. So what's humility? What's humbleness or humility?
Lowering yourself below others.
Put people in front first.
There you go. I think you're right on there, brother. Yeah.
I love this. I learned this a long time ago. You ever saw that? You know what that word is?
Jesus over you?
No. What is that word?
Joy.
Jesus
Joy.
others in you.
Joy.
Oh, it's
No,
it's Jesus others in you.
I thought it was a trick
Okay,
question.
but you're right.
That's right.
It's Jesus,
Others
it's an
and
acrylic.
you.
Jesus, others than you. And humility is not just, you know, kind of reducing yourself down. It's not even thinking about yourself. You're not even putting yourself anywhere in the line, really, of anything. You know, it's all this right here. You know, it's all about Jesus first. And just, I mean, again, it goes back to the greatest commandment. Love what? Love the Lord your God with all your what?
Heart.
Soul and mind and strength. And then what else?
Others.
Then you love others. And again, I've told you this, and we studied this, and if you can't love others, all others, not just your friends, not just the people we go to church with, not your co-workers, but the people that you really just don't like to associate with. The people it's not you don't like to associate with, it's just kind of like, well, I don't really go, I really don't want to, I don't have a need to associate with this person. It's kind of like it's kind of like for students, when we tell students, it's kind of like the kid that's sitting at a lunch table all by himself. Because everybody's got their cliques. And this one kid either came to school late,
Whatever.
and moved into the neighborhood or whatever, but he didn't have the friends, or because of some disability or whatever, he's just off by himself. And see, in our natural tendencies is that, hey, I'm going to come and be friends with the people who I want to be friends with. And so we have our friend circles, we have our little cliques and stuff like that. And so when we see a person that we normally don't associate with, it's not that we ignore them or intentionally ignore them, but in a sense, in our minds, we've already have ignored them. We've already have decided that, hey, I'll pray for this guy, I'll help him out. Or if I see a guy on the road and he needs money, I may give him some money, and so and it's kind of like, well, this is the right thing to do. It's the Christian thing to do. But Jesus said, because you're still putting yourself up above that person. You need to convert yourself. You need to have the converted attitude of that of a child. And so he says verse 6, for whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be thrown into the depth of the sea. I mean, just think about it. I mean, this is Jesus talking about. Now, it's going to get even worse.
Me and Kenny were just talking about that a while ago.
Okay, go ahead. What about it?
About people that live in abusive relationships, and the guy abuses the wife and the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff, and those kids are going to grow up, and they're going to stumble.
That's right.
It's bad. It's just they're never going to be able to forget. It's going to have to be dealt with one way or another. But it's the whole thing with that, like you were saying, that kid, the outsider or the non-grouper. Even though we are tribal and we want to be like that, it's to take the next step to gather that guy that's sitting in a restaurant by himself eating, for no real good reason. I don't know you from Adam, but come on over here. It's just, there are the little things that it's a mindset that does require change.
Mm-hmm. But stumbling is not just people who are sinful and causing other people to stumble.
Right.
Let's continue on because you'll see this. He says in verse 7, woe to the world because it is It is a stumbling block.
Mhm.
Exclamation point. For it is inevitable that stumbling blocks are to come. But woe to the man through whom the stumbling block comes. Now here's the interesting thing. He's not just talking about the, this person absolutely doesn't believe in God, and woe to that person who is, causing other people to stumble. He's talking about us. Look at, if you want to look, I'll read these to you. Romans, or 1 Corinthians. Paul was sitting there, and he was sitting there, and he was discussing, and I remember when we studied through 1 Corinthians, they were really just having a big battle over food and, and who has the right spiritual gifts and everything else, and what kind of gifts they had. And I can speak in tongues, you can't speak in tongues, kind of stuff. But anyway, he writes, he says, we should not judge or belittle a person, and we should not judge one another, for we become stumbling blocks. Okay, so he went on to say, hey, look, if this guy here believes that I should only eat everything that's kosher, and I'm from the camp of, hey,
Bacon.
everything's good to me, bacon, yeah, bring it on. If I'm around the person that's, only wants to eat certain things, I shouldn't go bringing my big old skillet and full of bacon and say, hey, look what I mean, ha ha ha. It's like, no, you don't do this. So that's a stumbling block. In Romans, he says, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather determine this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in front of one of our brothers. So when Jesus is talking about, hey, yes, woe, first of all, this world has many stumbling blocks. That's a given. Jesus is not saying it. But woe to the person through whom puts stumbling blocks in front of other people. And it's not just the world. It's us. Now think about it. How do we as believers do stumbling blocks in front of others?
You see a homeless person something and you give them money just because people looking.
Okay.
Or if you are in front of people and you try to humiliate them.
Okay. What else? How else do we cause other brothers and believers to stumble as Christians? I mean, those are right too, but also just,
It could be anything. I mean, for like me, open a box of donuts, dude. I have no business eating donuts. I'll eat a donut, don't get me wrong. What I mean? But it is, do I need that? Same thing, do you take an alcoholic to a bar? You bring a 12-pack to his cookout? You don't know. You don't know if that cousin over there his or his nephew had a problem with it. Just mindful, I reckon.
Okay.
I think anytime you argue with someone, you become a stumbling block. Right? It's really just as simple as that. Because you've raised that person's resentment to you. They have a hard time understanding. Why is your opinion so different than mine? What are you, superior to me? And it can be about anything. Religion, politics, weather, it don't matter.
We just
When
weathered
you
that
get into an
storm.
argument, you try to shove it down somebody else's throat, they're going to turn you off forever.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's pretty good in there, bro.
Because here's the thing. Oh, Marty has the PhD. He's the only one that can teach the Bible. Ixnay. No way. Just because I may have been a Christian a little bit longer than some of you guys doesn't mean that I have the superior knowledge. Because all I do is just sit and read. And guess what? Everyone can do that. I love it. John, our youth group, and I love this. I mean, we always went to Forward, and Forward's a fun festival or, camp to go to for the kids, stuff like that. You meet with you're in a coliseum with 13,000 other students, and it's upbeat and it's going wide open. I've been doing youth ministry for a bunch of years, and I'll tell you, some of the best camps I've ever been to is when you take your group off and go do something just with that group. And so, because of COVID, Forward's canceled again this year. So here's what God's put on John and Jennifer's heart, which really is a kind of an answer to one of my prayers, is that, hey, we go find a retreat of our own. And so we're going up to the mountains, and the Pursuit band, not the youth band, but the Pursuit band is going to lead us in worship. Probably Cliff and some other people maybe talk. But we're going to have opportunities just to be us amongst ourselves, having fun and learning together and still breaking them small groups like that. And trust me, God moves in that type of situation more than you ever dream of in a lot of ways, and I'm excited about this.
You probably get more traction there than you would have at the big.
But the thing is a lot of times we think, well, we got to do church a certain way. And that can be a stumbling block. Or, hey, as a pastor, I've got to preach this way, and I can't. And lo behold me, I sit, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Lo behold, I really get down on people because of certain sins that Bible says are sins, but yet it happens so much in our church. If I talk about this, lo and behold, I'll lose half my membership. Because again, a lot of people, and trust me, I'm not saying who, but a lot of us, we are getting so comfortable with certain sins in our lives. And I can't tell you what those are. I'm going to let you figure it out for yourself. But we get so comfortable with certain sins, including Marty Vance. We get comfortable with certain sins in our lives. We don't feel that grieving of the Holy Spirit that Paul talks about in Ephesians, because we have become so comfortable and we begin to ignore the Holy Spirit saying, hey, you know what? I'll give you an example. I'm big on Marvel. I love Marvel movies and stuff like that. I'm not as big as my son-in-law, but I still like watching the movies. Well, Disney's coming out with this thing called WandaVision, and whether you watch that stuff or even know who those people are and everything else, it's been kind of neat little show to watch. But then all of a sudden, in the last 2 episodes of WandaVision, they started to bring in witchcraft. You're this, Wanda who has these powers that came from one of the stones. Supposedly she's a witch and all this kind of stuff. Well, my wife's been watching this stuff with me, and all of a sudden she goes, I ain't watching this anymore, period. And she just left the room. Well, where's Marty Vance at?
Still looking at it.
Marty Vance still watching it.
Following the story.
Here's what I'm doing. In my little mind, I'm going, I'm mature enough to understand that that's not right and everything else. And I'm sitting here justifying while my wife's walking out the door, and I'm thinking, and I'm sitting here, and her walking out the door. And so, the first episode, she walked out the door. Guess what? Next episode, shut up. Hopefully they changed that line a little bit. No, they didn't. They made it even worse. And my wife said, are you really going to watch this? I'm going,
All they does is
but still, I appreciate my wife. But the thing is, hey, here I am. And now the question is do I even let Obadiah, who wouldn't understand now, but when he gets older, do I let Obadiah watch those things? Is that what I allow my kids to watch and what I allow my kids to listen to? I can't tell my kids of Josh's age or Michael's age and say, hey, you can't watch it anymore. They got to make their own decisions. But when they were little, I did. And that's why I think Linda got mad at me, is because I would ask the first grade, second grade, third grade teachers of my kids, do not let them draw ghosts and witches and everything else when it came to Halloween. And I didn't let them watch Scooby-Doo and all that kind of stuff. And, and then they go, what? And then when they became teenagers and told, oh, my dad wouldn't let us watch Scooby-Doo, other people go, you got to be kidding. But I did. I choose not to. But here's Marty Vance now sitting down watching WandaVision.
Well, they're going to go to college anyway.
Right.
You've been raising kids that you do your best, and the world's they're still going to have to deal.
Right. But the point I'm getting to is that we shouldn't lax in our standards now that our kids are grown.
Right.
And that's where my wife's getting on my cases, because here was Marty Vance saying, oh, you shouldn't be paying attention to this kind of stuff, and now here's Marty Vance watching stuff because the kids are grown. I'm going, because I got a son-in-law that loves this stuff.
Well, it's a Marvel thing.
But still,
boy.
when you really think about it, and you go back to this, and you realize what he's saying here. He's saying, hey, look, don't be a stumbling block. And so the question is we can be real quick to say, oh, a stumbling block is, worldly things. Stumbling blocks are a bar, or stumbling blocks are, whatever. But the thing is in just as Paul and James and the other writers of the New Testament, they weren't writing to the world, they were writing to believers. And they're saying, hey, we should not be a stumbling block to believers. We shouldn't be a stumbling block to a person who's not a non-believer for sure, but we shouldn't even be a stumbling block to our own people. We should really watch out. our attitude. Again, it goes back to what Jesus was saying. You've got to be converted. You've got to have that complete change of attitude.
Then they know you by your action.
That's right.
Like you were saying last week, it's pretty easy to slide right back when people are in that, you get in that groove and the F-bombs start flying around and whatnot, and it's not, you know it's not right. You know they know better. But it's still, how does one